He spent 9 years in the BPM and automation space. There was a recap earlier featuring some of the features that are in live meetings. Simply wanted to recap from that. We do highly recommend and highly encourage questions throughout the presentation. Please use the Q&A feature found in the upper left toolbar. Simply go ahead and type your question in, and those questions will be seen by myself as well as the presenters. Please note that all questions are held until the end. We're also using the feedback feature, which is located in the upper right toolbar. This is a great way to communicate with the moderator as well as the presenter from regarding how fast or how slow, or if you can't hear the presentation. So please, again, feel free to use both of those tools. This webcast is being recorded. We will notify everybody here as soon as the recorded version is available. Typically takes anywhere from 3 to 5 business days to get that taken care of. So please, if everybody is ready at this point, make sure your feedback color is set to green. And if you are still having difficulty once we get the presentation started, I will reach out to you and we'll get that resolved. So at this point, everybody, you should be able to see the K2 Blackpoint the title slide here that's being presented by Rudi. And we, again, look forward to your questions and your feedback. And if everybody's ready, please make sure your seat color is green. And at this time, I'd like to turn our presentation over to Rudi. Rudi?
John, thank you very, very much. Everybody, thank you for joining us, and thanks for the opportunity to share some information with you today around K2 Blackpoint, as well as the K2 company itself. I think it's always important to understand the entities that's behind these offerings and these products. And from that perspective, you can see K2's been in the space for quite a while. First released in 2000. Company is headquartered in Washington, Redmond. If you play in the Microsoft space, I think it's a great place to have headquarters, well represented globally. Revenue perspective, grown triple digits year on year, exceeded our expectations again in 2008, 1,700 customers in counting, in more than 53 countries, and we're proud to say that 20% of the Fortune 100 companies currently are K2 customers. And then we also have 1 million users in counting. From a success perspective, I think one of the big things that make K2 successful is our partners. You can see we're dealing with some of the global SIs like Avanade and HP, and also nationally with Neudesic. Strong relationship as well with Microsoft. So there's a few points. I'm not going to go through all of them. Founding partner in the Business Process Alliance. We've got strategic relationships with more than 25 Microsoft technology teams, and we also share some go-to-market initiatives across many verticals with Microsoft. Having said that, if we look at today's topic, K2 Blackpoint, the question comes up, what is Blackpoint? So then in the orange, you can see it is SharePoint workflow. As the name say, K2 Blackpoint, SharePoint, it is workflow for SharePoint with more features and no code. So what does it mean? It's a powerful way to build workflows, route your Word documents, Excel spreadsheets for approval, but also to build process-driven applications. Leverage the list data and the information that you store in SharePoint inside an application, and then execute on a pre-built process, ensuring a result that is the same every time. Ease of use, I think if you play in a no-code space, it is very important that non-technical people need an easy place to design. So there is an office-style designer as well as a Silverlight-based designer for ease of use for the very end customer. And then some feedback from the market. Affordability, price-value ratio is unprecedented. Guys, from every customer that has bought Blackpoint at this stage, the product was released beginning last week. We've got more than 30 customers already, and they've all said that we've exceeded the expectation. What they thought they bought and what they got is really great. So a lot of people come up and they say, so what makes Blackpoint different than the other applications? And then rather me putting up a slide of all potential competitors, I'm going to give you some fundamentals. And you can look at this and compare K2 functionality against anything else out there and see how we fare there. So the first one is very important, is a graphical workflow design experience for both business and technical users. I have yet to see a business user work in Visual Studio, and I don't see developers designing in an end-user experience. Both of those have got qualities and criteria that they need and that they are used to working with, so a one-size-fits-all does not work. That's why you'll see K2 have various designers depending on the role that you fulfill in the organization, from a Visual Studio, a Visio, the Blackpoint Studio designer, as well as the Silverlight designer inside of SharePoint to facilitate that. The important thing is that all those designers create the same underlying solutions file. So you can open that Studio, that Silverlight-based design inside Visual Studio, and you can continue and extend it. In terms of the ability to create applications that is not site, list, server, or farm-bound. So I can move documents, cross-site, site collections, servers, and even server farms. The ability to apply custom workflows to content type, very, very important if you do content management. Easily model and manage rework. I need more information. I want to loop back to any previous step. How can I do that very easily with K2? The ability to model serial approval steps, one after the other one, multiple people, one after the other one. Custom actions based on amount. Say, for instance, the expense claim is less or more than $5,000. I want to spend it to special roles for approval. The ability to escalate. And then everybody say, if my manager don't approve my expense claim within 2 days, it should escalate to his manager. But nobody keeps in mind that we're working in the States, and I have the East Coast, Central, and West Coast all on different time zones. Now I can escalate back in time and into the future. How do you manage that? What about weekends and public holidays that influence your service level agreements? Right there, Kate, to have time zone recognition, so we can do that for you as well as an out-of-the-office assistant to handle that if your boss is not available. Parent-child processing, share information between processes. Guys, this is not just the ability to kick off or trigger another process. Processes can share data in between them and say, for instance, have an expense claim. What is the value? It's over $5,000. Have to go for financial approval. Give them all the information that has been gathered up until now in the standard expense claim. Have them make their decision, come back to the original expense claim, and continue. Okay, to handle that out of the box and sharing of information. Version control, very, very important. Everybody thinks and they compare products about how easy it is to create a process. Once these processes run and you want to now introduce a new review step, how do you do that? How do you deploy the new version of the process? Can that version control manage the version of the form as well as the associated version of the process? Because if I realize that I've broken the process and I want to go back to a previous version, now I have a new version of the form and an old version of the process. K2 handles version control of forms and processes for you out of the box. And as I said, the parent-child processing, inter-process communication, we can even do synchronously and asynchronously. From a management perspective, working with InfoPath forms, we can work with InfoPath, the Reach client, as well as the form services, web-based. We can work with state-based workflows, multiple forms in a single process from an InfoPath perspective. We also have a Reach out-of-the-box process portal environment. It's your one view of your processes, your process dashboard. Very importantly, it also gives you error handling. Okay? If you have a 6-month process running in SharePoint and something goes wrong, where is that process? Where did it break? How can I fix it? If you don't have it, you're going to restart that 6-month process from the beginning. So error handling is very, very important. The ability to support multiple environments. How do I move from my testing, my development, my staging to production? Is it a click of a button or is it a rebuild exercise every time? Scalable workflow execution that won't affect the performance of your MOS environment. I don't want to, if I start utilizing workflow more and more, start burdening my MOS environment. How can K2 handle that? Very easily. We have our own host, can run on the same server, but I do my processing utilizing the K2 engine. And then some basic insight, a unified task list of all processes across sites and workspaces, a dynamic graphical view of where I am in the process. We call it our view flow. And then also rich reporting that gives me drill-down functionality to actually see what's going on a granular level. If everyone been ever to a SharePoint event, you should have seen the SharePoint wheel, as Microsoft mentioned it. I've colored it in with SharePoint workflow. Looking at Windows SharePoint services, we can extend it using InfoPath and ASP forms, also the integrated SharePoint list forms. We mentioned that we can span sites and workspaces and servers, server farms. We don't compete with SharePoint. We integrate to the SharePoint workflow environment, the ability to associate with content types. I mentioned our process portals, the one view of your process and all process information. I can manage list and document libraries. I can create them, update them, trigger processes when a new list item gets created, and I can manage sites and workspaces. So if you think about site provisioning, SharePoint governance, it's an out-of-the-box exercise. Collaboration, we mentioned escalations, the out-of-office assistant, the easy designers, as well as the ability to redirect work to someone else or delegate work and give them the ability to only partially execute and participate in that activity. Use SharePoint search, even use those search results in the process and alter the flow of the process. And then from a business intel, again, your process portals for the technical guys and ADO.net data provider if you want to utilize any K2 process data and build your own reports, and as well as a number of out-of-the-box reports. Adding mass to the picture, InfoPath form services comes into play, manage web content, the process-driven applications start playing a role, records management, as unified task list, for argument's sake, your My Site, and then the ability to action out of Office, a browser, or a task list. A very important aspect I think all business users are waiting for is the pricing. So there's 3 levels there. The Team Edition, that is for companies that run K2 and SharePoint on the same physical server, the same box. Less than 200 users, $5,000. Guys, it's a perpetual once-off license. The standard is unlimited licenses, K2 and SharePoint on the same box, okay, but unlimited users. And in Enterprise, it is for companies that have multiple SharePoint front ends and they want to run K2 in a distributed environment, or have one K2 server dedicated to K2 servicing multiple SharePoint web front ends or even multiple SharePoint farms. So if there's any questions on pricing, we're more than happy to address those at the end as well. Lastly, for everybody that is in our Arizona, Phoenix area, we're going to have a chalk and talk on March 19th from 4 to 6 at Microsoft. If any of you have more Blackpoint questions or want to see more, we're going to talk about Blackpoint. We're also going to talk about our flagship product called Black Pearl. So you're more than happy to join us there. Deepa will also be there to answer some more questions that you guys might have. And then for our SoCal people, please join us. We have a K2 Blackpoint event with Neudesic at the Microsoft MTC on March 24th from 9:45 to 12 o'clock. So we look forward to seeing you guys there. And with that, that is the end of my presentation. Deepa, thank you very much for taking us now into a bit of an end-user experience and showing us afterwards as well as how easy it is to get to that end-user experience and how easy it is to design and build with K2 Blackpoint. Thank you.
Thanks, Rudi. So what I'm going to do, we've got about, I'll go for about 30 minutes and then open it up for questions. What I want to do is take you guys through an end-user experience of a pre-built process in K2, and then we'll go back and review how it was built and how easy it was to take pre-built pieces and put them together to accomplish something like this. So the scenario we're going to be looking at today is an internal recruitment solution. It's basically, you know, the HR department posting job postings internally, employees being able to apply for it, and then go through the entire process until a candidate gets hired. So I've got a couple of users and their browsers pre-set up. We're going to start out as Cody, who's going to, as I launch her browser, it's going to log me into the SharePoint site as Cody. Also want to point out and say if you cannot see my VPC, you may have to scroll a little bit, or at the bottom right-hand of your live meeting, go ahead and hit the full screen button, and you might be able to see this a little bit better. So if I'm Cody the user. I'm going to go to the HR site to see what job postings have been posted internally. As I'm looking through these, I notice that there's a website administrator job that's open. If I wanted to apply for it, I would go ahead and go to the internal recruitment web part, click new document, and it's going to pre-open up a form that's asking me basic information about who I am and what role I'm applying for. As soon as I select that I'm applying for the website administrator role, it's going to show what department Cody's a part of and the department manager. The other thing you can do inside InfoPath, which makes it really useful, is attachments. So as part of this form, I'm not only collecting information, I can go ahead and attach my resume right away. So that helps people out in the sense that they don't have to retype information from their resume. I'm sure when you have gone to apply for job postings online, you have to retype the same information that's already inside a resume, nicely formatted, and try to format it in their engine. In this case, you don't have to do that. I'm just going to go in and attach a resume and go ahead and submit my request. Then tell you that the form was submitted successfully. Go ahead and hit OK on it and close out. Now that request is going to, so that request has been submitted as I'm interested in this position, and it has gone to Mike. I'm sorry, Mike is the K2. Go ahead and open up Mike's browser because Mike is set up as a K2 management administrator. So some of the functionality that Rudi talked about, the graphical user interface and seeing the view flows and what status they're in, I want to be able to show you guys that. So I'm going to go ahead and open up his browser and go to the K2 management tab. What I want to see is the request that Cody just submitted and what the status of that is. So these are some out-of-the-box reports that have been pre-set up, all out of the box, just simple configuration necessary to get them going. I'm looking for processes that are active for the internal recruitment process. Here's the one that I just submitted at 10:20 a.m. This view flow image right here, this is what's going to give me a graphical status of this process that Rudi referred to earlier. So what it's showing me is that the process started, Cody submitted her request, it set up a recruitment site for her, and now the blue means that it is pending her manager's approval. We'll come back to this flow a little bit later to show you guys how this is updating as the process is going through the different steps. Now what it means by set up recruitment site, let me go ahead and show you guys that. What it basically did when I submitted a request and I added my resume to that form, under the HR site, it created a sub-site to manage Cody's request. So created 2 minutes ago. This is the right one. So what it did was it created a web part that's giving you the status of everything that's happened in this process. It created a document library and put Cody's resume in here. It basically created a single site that people can go to see all documents related to her interview process. Especially in scenarios where you might have candidates going through multiple interviews, you might need to share those documents across multiple people that are part of the decision-making process. Being able to do something like this is very, very useful because now you're not emailing things back and forth. Everyone's looking at the same version of everything, which is exactly what, SharePoint is for, collaboration and versioning. If anyone's making any changes, anyone involved in this process is going to see that. So K2 lets you use SharePoint without code and build processes that allow you to do real-life scenarios simply and use SharePoint to its fullest. So we've got a site created for Cody. Her resume is submitted on here. People that have access to the site will be able to come, track her progress, and see what's going on. Give me just a second. And you guys saw the view flow. So now what I actually want to do is go to the manager that was showing on that request when I submitted. I'm going to go ahead and open up a browser for Chris and show you guys the next step in this process is obviously manager approval. So I'm going to open up Chris's browser, and on the main page we have, as soon as this loads, we've got a web part called K2 Worklist. Now this is also what Rudi referred to in the benefits of K2. This is your single web part to see all tasks that are assigned to you across multiple processes. So as soon as you come in here, you're going to get a single view into what's pending for your review, what actions you need to take. So you can see this is an internal recruitment request that's pending manager approval. A couple of things that it allows you to do from the web part. You can action it from right here if you wanted to. So that's going to allow you to do, but obviously in this scenario, you're going to want to open up the document and see what's in there, see where the website was created, review the resume. But what this allows you to do is if you did have multiples in here, you'd be able to batch action it from right here. You'd be able to select it and say schedule interview. If you had a lot of things that were pending, a real life scenario where this comes in really handy is say if you had expense approvals pending your approval, you can take this folio field and put any kind of data from the process in here. So one of the things you could do is expense request in the amount of $50. That's what you would want to show up here. So if you're the type of person that's going to approve everything under $20 and you don't want to open up each item one by one, you can go ahead and select those appropriate ones if there were multiples in here and batch action it. In this case, we're actually going to go ahead and click on it and open the request. As soon as it opens, it shows me her resume that's attached. I can open it from right here. It shows me Cody's applied for the website administrator job. Allows me to set the first interview date to say we're going to go ahead and schedule it for tomorrow at 5 p.m. And then my status, I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm scheduling an interview because it's the first step in the process. And I am going to go ahead and submit this. And it shows that the form was submitted successfully. Now if I go back to my view flow window and refresh it, you're going to see that the manager approved it, the first interview was scheduled, and now it's pending first interview review. So the blues moved down to the current status of the workflow. If any of these steps were skipped for any reason or if they weren't valid, then you'll see these boxes turn to red to show you that that step was never reached because the logic of the workflow never requested it. Now if you go back to Chris's browser and if we go back to Chris's browser and I'm going to just refresh this to make sure I'm looking at the most recent version. I'm going to see that the old task of scheduling the old task of approving the request has gone away, and the first interview review is pending. So this is basically created. I scheduled an interview with Cody for tomorrow at 5 o'clock. This is a task for Chris to be able to come back after the interview and put in his feedback or put in his comments. So we're going to pretend that interview already happened. Go ahead and open it, and again, you can see you can action it from right here. The action items have obviously changed now that it's an interview phase. Chris can either say the interview was successful or the candidate was unsuccessful. He can also, and I'm not going to do any of these, but let me speak to a couple of other options you have in here. He can also put the process to sleep. And when you try to put the process to sleep, it's going to ask you for how long, absolute time or relative time. Functionality like this is really handy if you're ever doing something where maybe you're waiting for a third party to get back to you and you don't want this task to constantly show up in your task list because you know this vendor is going to get back to you on such and such date or in 5 to 10 business days. What that does is it takes that task out of your task list and it will resurface once that time has elapsed. So it keeps your work list clean for things you can actually work on a daily basis. You can redirect or delegate the task to someone else. So I'm going to go ahead and open it. And it's going to show me basically everything that's happened in the past, the submittal and the interview was scheduled. The manager can go in here and say that the interview was successful. Go ahead and put in a salary and a decision and resubmit this form. I'm going to go back to the vFlow and refresh it. So there's there is there's the finalized process. So the green are the steps the process actually went to. If the candidate had been unsuccessful, it would have gone to the right. There would have been another review with the candidate, and the candidate would have been declined. So the red is telling you the direction that it didn't go because the business logic didn't direct it to go that way. And at the end, Cody was hired. Now, the last thing this did, if I go to the HR site, that's fine, let's do this. If I refresh Chris's browsers, you can see that he's got no pending tasks remaining. He's done everything that was associated with that process. Now, if I go to HR site, the other thing this process also did was it added an announcement that says Cody was hired for this position. Congratulations. It did not do a duplicate, just so you guys aren't thinking that it did. The timestamp on this is older. It was just me preparing for this webcast where I went through this process before, but it submitted it for the timestamp of now. Now, that's the process that we went through. Now let's take a look at this particular process was built using K2 Studio. K2 Studio is one of the K2 Blackpoint's development environments. This is a pretty complex process in the sense that it updated SharePoint list items, it created SharePoint sites, it created tasks for people. So in this case, we used K2 Studio to build this. What K2 Studio allows you to do, and this process was built using SharePoint and InfoPath. So when you would open K2 Studio, normally you'd be at the Home tab. If you go to the Process tab, you'll see that I've got an InfoPath Forms integration instance. When I first started building this process, all I did was I had my InfoPath form pre-built and pre-designed. I went in here and added it and said, this is the form that I want to use with this process. Where do I want to publish this to? I want to publish this to the SharePoint form library, gave it the site URL, gave it the form library. Do I want to add it as a library template or a content type? Those of you familiar with SharePoint will know those are the two options for publishing forms inside SharePoint. Content types allow you to publish multiple forms to the same library, and library templates are one per library. Also gives you the option of, do you want to use the web browser or InfoPath? These are basically the same options that SharePoint has out of the box inside. So K2 very well integrates with SharePoint in the sense that you can set all those settings inside your K2 process, and when you deploy this form, it's going to set those settings for you on the form library. I'm going to ask you, so these are the lists that I was integrating with. This was the job openings list, that first drop-down that you saw on Cody's request that allowed her to select the job that's open. So these were the out-of-the-box smart objects that were pointing to those lists to be able to utilize information in your current SharePoint environment inside your forms. Now, in the next screen, what I'm telling it is this is the form template, so this process is one form template associated with it, and this is the view. As soon as the resume is submitted, I want to be able to kick this process off, and this is what kicks the process off, the submitting of that resume, so Cody initially submitting her resume. The folio field that I was referring to in the work list, we left it at internal recruitment, but this can be anything, internal recruitment for. So this allows you to use, these XML fields are out of your form template. So this allows you to give users, if you wanted to say, this is a candidate recruitment request for Cody Kaji, what I'm doing is, from the InfoPath form that you saw, I'm grabbing her first and last name. And doing it this way, what it's going to do is you can leverage more information for your users right in the work list. That way, they don't have to open the item to know what that item is for. And like I said, extremely useful in scenarios where you want to batch approve expense requests under a certain amount. If you leverage this to show that amount to people, they'll be able to do the batch approval. The default settings. And that's how simple it is to integrate and start off a process. All of these objects that are being used here, these are all out of the box wizards that you can drag and drop and configure. There's no code necessary to do any of this. So creating a recruitment site, and that was a site that I showed you guys that it built. It grabbed the resume, uploaded it to the site, and created a recruitment site for Cody. It's all out of the box. When I drag and drop this wizard onto the space, it's going to ask me, what do I want to do? Do I want to create a new site, or do I want to update the site's properties? Do I want to delete a site, which is really useful, being able to do that and clean things up after the process has gone through. If I want to create a new site, what's the site URL that I want to create it at? What's the title and the description from the site? So anything that you see in green here, it is basically taking, this is the same thing I was trying to do with the folio field. It's taking the first name and last name of the person that's submitting the request and creating a site with that title. What that allows you to do is, you know, as long as you select things from your info platform that are going to be unique, you won't run into errors in trying to create an object that already exists. In this case, we used the person that's submitting the request, their first name, their last name, and the job role that they're applying for, because the same person will not apply for the same job at the same time twice. So creating a task, I'm going to go through how simple that was. All we did was, so this is all using the same InfoPath form, and all it's doing is it's using different views inside InfoPath forms. I'll open up the form in a few minutes here and show you what that looks like. But what I'm saying is, when schedule the first interview, it's using the exact same form, the internal recruitment form template, and it's saying use the client event view of schedule first interview. So that's when you guys saw through the process, you saw that as I was building on the process, I was seeing all of the older information that's been pre-submitted and all the older actions that have been completed, and it was building on it and letting me submit new information based on where in the process I was. The task action field, that was the drop-down that was changing. That matches between the form and the task list. So initially when Cody submitted a request, I could approve it. After that, I could schedule a first interview. After that, when the first interview was scheduled, the actions changed to the candidate being successful or unsuccessful. So all I'm doing is schedule those tasks again, is selecting the form number and the view that I want to display during that particular task. Do you want to send a notification of the event to the destination users? Yes or no? That will allow people to send an email. In the email, you can also action these. So you've got 3 ways to complete your tasks. You can open the form directly, complete it there. You can batch action it through the K2 work list. Or if you were to enable notifications, you'll be able to complete your actions right from your email as well. And all of these options can be turned on or off. So here are my actions for this process. I could schedule an interview. This is, so this is my first process. All I said was I want to be able to schedule an interview. Now, if you were uncomfortable with the idea of letting people batch process, batch action items without actually opening up the item, I'm going to let you guys know that is completely optional. You can uncheck this box that says make the action available without opening the work item, and that will force your users to have to open the work item and look at it. So all that functionality, completely optional. Use it where it makes sense, and don't use it where it doesn't make sense. Here's this, so I think I've already shown you guys how it created the site, how the task was created, and then the last announcement that we saw, that said that Cody was hired to this new position. This is another out-of-the-box wizard that you can use to update SharePoint list items or create SharePoint list items. So all we did was we created a list item inside SharePoint where the site URL is, what is the name of the list, what's the content type. So if your list had multiple content types, you can select what's the content type. And then as soon as I did that, it's going to go to SharePoint, pull all of the fields that are associated with that content type for that list, so a title, a body, and expiration date. I can use, again, everything in green is things that are part of my process, information that was a part of my process. So I can use everything from my current process, like Cody's first name, Cody's last name, and even this, right now it's typed in to say hired, but even this could go off of the task action field that says hired. So all of this, it's leveraging all the information that was part of your process to update the SharePoint. And let me go ahead and finish this. Some of the other wizards that you have, some of the other wizards that you have, just to give you an idea of what you can do with SharePoint, some of the other wizards that you have access to, mail events allow you to Mail events allow you to send complex emails with a lot of information, HTML formatted or non-HTML formatted. Let me show you. So the process of using a wizard is as simple as taking it, dragging it onto your screen. It's going to give you, based on what the wizard is, it's going to give you what you're trying to do with it. So this is a mail wizard. It's going to ask you who the email's from, who it's to, and I'm not going to complete this, but I just want to show you guys the wizard allows you to add information to the body of the email and go ahead and send it. And every single wizard is exactly the same way. You'll drag and drop it, and you'll see the options on it change based on what you've dragged and dropped. In this case, this is a list item. So what do I want to do? Do I want to create a list, update a list, delete a list? So the combination of all these wizards allow you to build your workflows out of the box with no code. Now, last thing I want to show you guys is the K2 Web Designer. So everything that you saw so far was built using the K2 Studio environment, which is this environment right here where you're dragging and dropping wizards and connecting them together to build complex workflows. Now, for something that was really simple, couple of steps, you can allow your Power users, your end business users, to build it right inside SharePoint. So an example of that is if I went to the main site, the development environment in this scenario is the K2 Web Designer, which is also what Rudi referred to in his presentation. It's the Silverlight-based designer that allows you to build simple workflows right out of the box, right inside SharePoint. So when you deploy K2 in a SharePoint environment, you're going to get this option of K2 Web Designer in addition to all the other options that SharePoint gives you. When you click on that, it's going to open up the K2 Web Designer and allow you to build. It's a very similar environment to K2 Studio. It's going to allow you to build a workflow right here. So I'm going to call it the approval workflow. So I want to start the process manually or when an item is created. Let's say I want it automatically started when an item is created. And very similar to K2 Studio, you've got wizards in here that allow you to, do same thing. So maybe you want to copy a list item. So this is inside a SharePoint list, so maybe you want to copy a list item to another list. Or maybe this is an approval workflow and you want to be able to approve and decline the request. So you can go ahead and drag and drop that on here. Give that activity a name, like manager approval. These are out of the box. I selected approve decline. I could select approve decline review, approve decline. These are the actions that you can perform on that based on what you selected. If it's approved, do you want to go to a new step or do you want to end the process? I'm going to go ahead next. The other part of the web designer that SharePoint will not let you do out of the box is if you had multiple people actioning a particular step in the process, you can turn this into a serial activity. As soon as you uncheck it, it'll be a parallel activity, but it does allow you to create out-of-the-box workflows that are serial. So you can go ahead and add, it can go ahead and search for users. I can go ahead and search for users on my SharePoint site, and as soon as I find them as available, go ahead and just drag and drop them and allocate them to this activity. And so in this case, I do have multiple users. I can make this a serial activity, go ahead and finish off the step. If it's approved, maybe at this point, I just want to send an email saying it was approved. So I'm going to go ahead and say request approved. I thought I did. Oh, I did not enter a to address. That's telling me that certain fields are required. I can go ahead and finish it. At this point, I can expand this to add an extra step or remove it, make changes to it. But you can see how using the same wizards right inside SharePoint without needing a different development environment, you can create pretty complex workflows out of the box inside SharePoint and then you can use the K2 Studio for workflows that are a little more complex than what you would do inside the web designer, but still everything is no code. You've got pre-built wizards, drag and drop them into the screen, connect them together the way you would, put in business logic that says, you know, what should go, which steps. So in this case, if the if the first review was successful, go ahead and hire the candidate. If it was unsuccessful, go ahead and do a candidate review and decline the candidate. But all of these are out-of-the-box things that are ready for you to use. They're pieces that are pre-built that you can connect as your business processes require to build workflows inside SharePoint, integrated with SharePoint with no code. And with that, I am going to go ahead and turn this over to Dion for any questions anyone may have.
Great. Thank you so much, both Deepa and Rudi, for your presentations today. Very, very informative. And we have a couple questions that have come in. Rudi, you had covered costs earlier, and I think associated with costs, maybe both of you can give us a little bit of information as far as what are some of the best places to start with something like this?
Great, Dion. I think that is a very valid question. So if you think about it, a lot of organizations find change management as one of the key problems that they have. So the minute you introduce workflow into an organization, Gartner and Forrester say that I think 75 to 80% of all software development projects fail due to user acceptance. So if you start with workflow, you have this concept of a big brother watching. I can now date and timestamp exactly every task that you do. People sometimes resist, and your end users don't feel that comfortable. With K2 Blackpoint, you actually create a pull strategy in the organization where an end user has the ability to go and modulate his own process where he sees value in the system helping him to automate some work, and then he can actually start executing on it. And as the organization see this is adding value, they can open it into the studio designer, they can grow and they can extend it, and ultimately end up in something like a black bull environment where you can automate the whole enterprise. And you find that more and more departments are asking for, if you can do a leave form and you can do an expense claim, why can't you do an invoice approval or maybe a CapEx approval, and the organization start pulling workflow through rather than the IT department enforcing it and saying from here on forward things will be automated. So I think from that perspective, Blackpoint is a very, very easy and nice way to start introducing workflow to your organization, as well as for everybody that has Windows SharePoint services that's looking for a motivation why to go to MOS. Guys, this runs on Windows workflow services or SharePoint services, and it's a great way to unlock the value in SharePoint and then ultimately use that as a motivation to grow into your MOS environment and leverage all the additional functionality in MOS. And for every company that have SharePoint and it's looking for reasons and ways to drive deployment and adoption, there is no easier way than to put your expense claim up there or a leave form. Everybody in the company, somewhere along the line, is going to visit that. So that's definitely good places to start and drive this change management and user adoption into a pull strategy rather than a push.
Very nice. Thank you. Deepa, do you have any thoughts as far as in your experience and what you've seen as far as the best place to start?
It really does depend on the client, but I think the only thing I can say to that is every organization knows what their pain points are. Every organization knows what process is really slow or really painful for their employees. So taking those processes and automating them, 90% of the time in my experience, that's been HR or finance. I mean, those are your departments to start, because your HR processes of applying for a job or your employee onboarding process, those are things that every company does. People have done that before, and K2 and SharePoint combined can relieve those problems by automating those entire solutions, the solutions that are going to impact employees globally. The onboarding process, how many times have you come into work or started a new job or started at a new client where for the first 3-4 days you're literally just sitting around waiting for access, waiting for your information to be ready, waiting for access into systems. I mean, it's a great process to start because if you can show the value in that as soon as a candidate is hired, so taking what I showed today and taking it one step further, if that candidate is hired, now it's going to go hook into your other systems and go ahead and give the person access to the appropriate areas based on role. How powerful is that scenario, showing that to your end users that, you know, the first day someone comes in, as long as we use this automated process to guide them through the entire process, when they come in, their information is going to be ready. They're going to have access into all the right systems, and they're going to be ready to go. Finance forms in terms of expense requests, PTO requests, being able to submit, not just submit a PTO request, but to integrate it with your HR system so that users only request PTO that they have. I mean, how many times do you have forms come back because their request needs to be denied because they didn't have enough PTO or there was an error in the request. So being able to show that the round trip time in those processes is going to decrease with a combination of integrated into your existing systems to only allow people to do actions that they have access or information to do, and data validation to make sure they're filling out all the required fields in the right format.
Very nice. So it really can help increase efficiencies and productivity for a lot of our employees.
Right.
Very good. And I think that's a request right now to all of us in this current environment is, right, I think we've all heard enough of, okay, we have to do more with less. So it's nice to know that there are some solutions out there. We have a question that, Kate, that has come in that says, what is the average learning curve?
I think I can take that, Dion.
Okay.
Thanks. Guys, that's a very important question. So if you think about it from a learning curve for an end user, and you think about what people have done in the Silverlight Designer, that is really, really a very intuitive environment. It's an environment where you develop from left to right as people read. It's all outcome-based, so you've got your outcome template, you drag it on there, you read it, and it's really, really straightforward. Okay, so from an end-user perspective, we've really seen, guys, to give you some idea, the software went live and released to market last week, Monday, and we've already got customers up and running live. Okay, so the adoption of that and the ease of use is really great. And then for anybody that is a business owner or a process owner or even an analyst or a master designer, if you start talking about site provisioning, site governance, those kind of things, and they see the SharePoint site wizards, it really makes sense and it's easy. So I think from that perspective, your adoption and your learning curve is pretty quick. We do have some training. The training is a 2-day course that we do, and we've seen people taking the course, installing the software, and actually start building their processes in a number of weeks. So that's really, really a quick learning curve.
Absolutely, and you know, I can definitely speak to that because Rudi's aware with how I was introduced to the product. Never having used it before, we were both assigned to a project where we needed to automate 10 processes for a client, and I think we had roughly 2 months to do it, and we were able to successfully complete it with me having no prior knowledge of the product at all.
We have one other question that's come in. Can workflows call external web services?
Absolutely. Deepa, I don't know if you want to maybe share your VPC and show how else I can do that as well. Guys, definitely. K2 Blackpoint can call web services as well as assemblies based on the fact that it's simple data types. If you have a string or a Boolean or anything like that, if you bear with me and you allow me to quickly share out my screen here, I'll quickly show you how that looks. Okay. So what I'm doing now is I'm just opening the K2 Studio Designer, and one of the wizards that you will see on the left-hand side is a reference wizard. So you can go and you can reference any web service or DLL that you've created, and K2 you can actually call that web service.
I'm not seeing anything on your screen, Rudi. Oh, there it goes.
Yep. It's just taking a minute. While we're waiting for that, there's another question that came in. Where does K2 get installed?
So it can get installed. It can get installed depending on how you want to set this up. If you want a dedicated K2 server, that's going to do all of your workflow processing. So creating the actions, routing people, hosting the K2 workflow web part. You can install K2, the server product, on a box by itself. And then there are K2 for SharePoint components that are going to be installed on all of your SharePoint boxes. You can also, if you had a single server environment, so maybe for your dev and staging environment, you can also install the K2 server product right side by side with your SharePoint. It just depends on how you want to scale out your environment.
Okay.
That is great. So guys, just to come back on the web services, this is where I can go inside of K2. I can literally go and I can tick on the reference events there. I can go and I can reference the various events or web services that I have. And then right here, I can go and at any point in time, drag across my reference event wizard onto any of my activities, reference that web service or that assembly, and get the data back. And one of the nice things that you also have at any point in time is you can go and you can call the K2 context browser on the right-hand side as well. So everywhere you go into any wizard, all the information that you have available, there's your workflow web service, there's your workflow server, there's your environments, anything that you can do over here. I can go and I can call that and say, let's make a change to the web service, deploy it for production, and actually get this going. All of this is available out of the box. There's also your XML fields for your InfoPad forms that you can actually go and access that information as well straight out of the box. So I don't have to go and do any typing or anything. I can just drag and drop that across onto my wizards. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay. When I'm sorry, Deepa, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay. Next question, when configuring workflows to involve specific persons, where does that list come from? Is it leveraging the people picker within SharePoint, or is it hitting some other directory site or directory store?
So in Blackpoint, I believe it's hitting the people picker inside SharePoint.
Okay.
Sorry, are you showing something, Rudi? Sorry, I'm seeing your screen moving, so
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say in terms of the demo where we actually got those users from was the actual list inside of the HR environment. So where you saw Deepa routing to Mike, we actually used a smart object behind the process. You actually go to Site Actions, K2 Settings. There's your smart object, so it's creating automatically an entity. There's your internal job posting. You just tick it, it automatically creates that object. And now what you can do is leverage that at any point in time inside your designer and say, there is my smart object event, drag it on there and start routing according to that specific user and so on. So you want to see what that integration looks like. I'm not going to do it end to end. You can have any info form. Even on your desktop, you can right-click it, say, I want to integrate with that smart object that I've just created inside my HR department. There's the internal job posting, and I want to say, get the list method and get the list of the role of the manager and utilize that or the email address to actually route the process to that specific individual as well.
And in the past, when I've built these, I mean, you can use SharePoint lists. I've built this before to use your reporting hierarchies. So if, even if that's not being stored in a list somewhere, if you have your manager is set up as someone, so your expense request, they should go to your manager, you can use those reporting hierarchies to route it. And then the K2 web designer, where I was literally just ad hoc picking people just to show you guys the web designer and the web designer interface, that was using the SharePoint people picker.
Is there a trial download available?
Absolutely. That's a perfect question. Everybody on the call, I encourage you to go to k2.com, okay, www.k2.com, and you will see there is a download of K2 Blackpoint. It is not an eval copy. It's not a scaled-down version. It's the actual release version that is just barred for 30 days. So anything and everything that you've seen us do today, you can actually go and do yourself, leveraging that copy that is valid for 30 days.
Okay. And we have another question. Do we have to use InfoPath for our forms in your workflows?
No, absolutely not. You can use InfoPath as your front end, and the only reason I demoed this using InfoPath was because of how easy it is to design forms in InfoPath. But you can absolutely use ASP.NET Forms.
Okay. Any other questions? Any final comments from either one of you?
John, thanks from my side. Just as I said, want to encourage people, please, you've got Dion's detail, you've got Deepa's detail, you've got mine. Please go to k2.com, play with the software, send us your feedback. If there's any questions, don't hesitate. You've got my contact number as well as the Neudesic, and reach out to us, and we would answer and help as soon as we can.
Absolutely. And if you are interested, and if you are, in the area, I highly encourage you guys to attend the Chalk Talk at the Microsoft offices, because what they are going to be doing there is actually building a process from start to end from scratch. So if you're interested in downloading the trial product, being able to see how someone's using it and how they're building a process from start to end is going to help you make the most out of your trial.
Great.
Thanks.
And again, thank you everybody for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Again, we will follow up with everybody. I'm sorry, we have one last question that came in. Oh, yep, I definitely will. I see this question. I will respond to you as soon as possible. So again, everybody, this presentation was recorded. We will send out the recorded version to you so that you have it, as well as being able to share it with some of your colleagues. Today or tomorrow, you will receive an email from me that will have today's presentation in there, which will have information for both events that Neudesic and K2 are a part of, the Phoenix event as well as the Irvine, California MTC event. There are some other events across the country that you may be able to participate in. So if you have some questions as far as what's going on in your geography, we'll be able to give you that information as well. And lastly, if you are interested, you want to engage with Neudesic and K2 for more information in your own specific environment, we can definitely come in and talk with you in a more one-on-one basis with you and your team and have a more in-depth conversation around this solution as it pertains to your environment. So again, everybody, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it and look forward to seeing you all at future webcasts. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Bye-bye.